Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 85 of the CRM MVP podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, I have an interesting conversation because a lot of the information that I'm going to be discussing is mainly based on personal experience. I would say that maybe is based on my own opinion, right, of what I've learned in previous projects. So this could be kind of a polarizing episode, right? There will be some people that will agree with me, some people that will disagree with me, but the idea again is to put what I know, what I've learned, what I understand essentially out there and let you judge and figure out, what best works for you or whether you should kind of adopt my best practices and essentially grow from it, right? Learn something from it. Or perhaps you agree with me in all of them, which is fine, or disagree with me in all of them, which is also fine. At least you get to hear another kind of side of the story or another opinion on the topic. Today's episode is mainly for solution architects, I would say. Maybe if you're a project manager, you can get some value out of this as well. But we're not going to be diving into features or anything, super technical or anything like that. I want to talk about wrong timing in projects, more specifically about things within projects that a lot of people do wrong, in my opinion. They start or too early or they start too late. So I want to talk about several things that I've noticed in a lot of projects, especially when I work with customers who want to take ownership of a few things within the project, which there's nothing wrong with that. If you're competent enough, you can do it. You can always take something from the project. Let's say you want to do the reporting piece or you want to do the data integration or whatever it is. Some customers have technical people that can do that. But again, I want to talk about timing because a lot of organizations and a lot of customers out there and even a lot of solution architects haven't really implemented Dynamics for a long time or Power Apps for a long time. So, getting the timing right sometimes is, it's tricky. So I want to talk about my top 10 things that people do wrong in projects, or at least at the wrong time. Not that they do it wrong, they just, started at the wrong time. So let's go ahead and get started. Number one on my list has to do with data. And I think we all pretty much can agree on this one. If there was one that we were going to agree on, this might be the one where we're all in agreement, which is data migrations and data integrations are always starting too late, right? In my opinion, data migration and data integrations have to start super early. Like before you even start customizing, you have to start the work in the data migration and data integrations. And obviously there's a ton of work that you have to do when it comes to migrations and integrations, depending on the complexity of data and all of that stuff. So, you want to start that work early. It's always interesting when, you work on projects and you see people that will do like 90% of the customizations, creating entities and fields and all that stuff before they actually start the data migration work. Now, I'm not saying that there's a way to somehow migrate your data or establish a data integration before you do the customization. No, of course not. Like you need entities and you need fields and things like that. If you're coming from, let's say, Salesforce and you're moving into Dynamics 365, there will be fields and entities and things like that you're going to have to create in order to migrate the data accurately and connect, bring all the fields and all of the data that was in Salesforce, bring it into Dynamics. I get that. You're going to have to do that. But at least you can get the work started. And by work, I mean, you can figure out how much data you have and compare it to how much data you're allowed to have in Dynamics 365 based on your licenses and your users and all of that stuff. Decide if that's going to work or not. And I get it. If you get a file from Salesforce that is 1 gig, let's just say, doesn't mean that it's going to be 1 gig in Dynamics. It could be half that or double that, depending on the kind of data that it is. We don't know until we actually do the import. In my opinion, typically, when you bring a file from a third-party system, it's always less in Dynamics 365 because of the way Dynamics deals with the different kinds of data, like file types versus actual, CRM data and whatnot. But the point is, that kind of work needs to start pretty soon. If you realize that you have 100 gigs of storage, let's say you're coming from Dynamics on-prem to Dynamics Online, and you have 100 gigs of storage or 300 gigs of storage or whatever it is, and you realize that your licensing only allows you to have, let's say, 80, That's a problem that you have to deal with. You don't want to deal with that after you're done with all your customizations and all that stuff. Like, you can start working on that very early before you start customizing dynamics at all. The idea is that by the time you finish with your customizations, you're ready to push the data in. You're ready to actually do the migration piece, right? The hitting, the button to whatever tool you're using to import that data. That's the piece that needs to happen after you're done with your customizations. But there's a bunch of work that needs to be done in terms of data migration and data integrations before you even get there. So start the work early. If you have too much data, you have to decide, well, do we really need 10 years worth of leads and 10 years worth of, won opportunities and things like that? Maybe not. Maybe you can cut off a lot of that data and only keep, let's say, the last 3 years or 5 years, whatever it is. There's some people that are going to have to be involved in this discussion, and you're going to have to make a decision, and you're going to have to, figure out what's the kind of data that you're going to move, or you're going to have to figure out if you're going to have to buy a bunch of storage because you cannot get rid of all your data. Regardless of what it is, all of those things need to happen before you actually get to migrate the data into Dynamics. So start early. By the time I'm done with customizations, if I'm responsible for customizing the system, I want to look at my technical architecture, technical resources team and be like, hey, the system is ready to push the data. And all I want to hear is, cool, we're going to do it this weekend. We're going to do it tonight. Like, they're ready to go. I don't want to look at them and be like, yeah, we haven't even gotten to that. That's a problem, right? So once again, data migrations or data integration starting too late, it's a problem that I see across the board in a lot of projects. And by the way, this also extends to the data that you may need for reporting. And we're going to talk about business intelligence in number 2 because I think they're connected, right? And this one is not business intelligence too late. It's actually too early. People start thinking about what reports they want and like what charts and dashboards. And I've seen them, for example, I've received pictures of current reports and things like that they're using. Like, before we even talk about like what kind of solution we're going to be implemented, they're already thinking about reports and dashboards. The point is, the problem is that if you are agreeing to a set of reports, especially the ones that are like, yeah, I want to do exactly what that looks like, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You don't know what can come up, along the way that could allow you to think of reports in a different way, maybe come up with better business intelligence reports. Because remember, the idea of business intelligence is that you can make business decisions based on your data, right? So if they're giving you a report and says, look, this is the kind of information that we're using right now to make our business decisions, as you work in Dynamics, you may think of different ways to do it that are even better, right, to do it. So I personally don't like to talk about business intelligence too early, like connecting with stakeholders, figuring out what their KPIs is, thinking about how am I going to deliver these reports or these dashboards. Like, that is if you do it too early, you're going to miss out on the ability to come up with something better once you actually have a solution that works, once you actually have, and you don't have to wait obviously until all the customizations are done to start the work, but wait towards the end. For example, right now in the times that we live, we just heard, from Microsoft on the next release, they're coming up with some really cool forecasting, reporting. And it's out there. If you look at the wave release, notes that are public right now, one of the things that they mention is these special forecasting capabilities that are coming up in October on the October release. You can opt in for them right now, by the way, when you're listening to this. And obviously, if you're listening to this as it comes out, it makes more sense, because if you listen to it after October, it's already out publicly. But right now, before October, you can opt in to get those features and start testing them out. So advanced forecasting or enhanced forecasting capabilities are coming out. If I was working in a project right now that was going live in like January, and let's say the project started in June, and I was already agreeing to what kind of report I was going to deliver and exactly how it's going to look and all of that, these capabilities that are coming out may be better than anything I agreed to in June that I didn't know it was coming. And now I shut myself in the foot by not taking advantage of the new features that could even delight the customer even further. So once again, business intelligence too early is one of those things that I've noticed in projects. People start worrying about reports and dashboards and charts way too early. Just wait a little bit. Start the customizations, have a framework for your solution, understand what entities and what kind of data you'll be pulling, what data integrations will be in place, and then decide what's the best business intelligence solution to implement. Don't do it too early. All right, number 3 on the list is security. And as you know, I'm a big fan of security and, understanding everything around it and, pushing for a very smart and very performant, I guess, security solution for every implementation that I work on. One of the mistakes that a lot of people make, and I've seen this very, very recently in projects that I've worked on or even in posts that I see on the community, is that people start working on security super early. So if you're working on a project, for example, that is going to take 6 months, just to keep using the example of June to January or whatever it is, if you already are setting up security roles and thinking about, what kind of permissions you need to apply right now, whatever, like right in June or July, you're going to be wasting so much time dealing with security, because along the way, every time you add an entity, every time you add something or you change your mind about whatever, you're going to have to go back and edit all your security. Now, if you keep it simple, like we talked about in episode 19, which is setting up security like an MVP, if you keep it simple, then the work is not as much, but you're still doing a bunch of work to keep up, the security with whatever changes you're making. I personally like to do security like all the way to the end, which means like I want users to be ready to test or something like that. Like right at that stage, that's when I want to do security. I want to wait as long as I can. When there's no way to, there's no way for us to wait any longer. We need users to go in the system and start testing the stuff or whatever it is. Then I'll apply security. So I personally like to wait as much as possible, because the more you wait, the less the time that you're going to spend actually dealing with security. It's not about putting things to the end, or it's not about, kind of like ignoring security. Security is very important. But I'm telling you, if you set this up super early, it's going to be a pain for the rest of the implementation. I've worked with customers that are like, we really need to set up. I cannot allow my users to be administrators. I'm like, whoa. Like anyone logging into the system, and I'm talking about the system we're implementing, should be an administrator right now. We're not ready for users to log in and start poking around. So we can wait. No. Let's set it up. Okay, fine. Let's have the security discussion. Then we set it up, and then I'm the one dealing with changes for months and months and months, because we keep on changing stuff along the way. That's what a project is about. That's what an agile methodology enables us to do, is to be, very dynamic and change things along the way and deliver and test and move forward, right? So every time we make a change, we have to go and mess with the security. Like, just wait till the end. Wait until right before the users need to log in to do it. It's just not going to go anywhere. Just take it easy, right? Security, it's not going to go anywhere. You can always do it later. So, once again, security, doing it too early is just a mistake. Wait. All right, and that was number 3 on the list. We're kind of flying through these. It's pretty interesting, and let's see as we move forward if we can dabble a little bit more into one of these. But number 4 is testing too late. Now, again, this one is connected to kind of the security. You don't want to give people security too early, because then, it's unnecessary. They don't need to log in. But also I've seen it in projects where they don't allow any users in until like the business has claimed that the solution is done or the project is done. And I've seen this being a huge problem for organizations out there, because, you're letting users log in once you say you're done, which means that their feedback is not really relevant. And the way I've seen it done before is they let the users in and they are like, we're done. Like, this is how the solution works, right? That's it. We're done. And then when users start providing feedback, they will be intricate to the role they do. Then they push it to like phase 2. They say, oh, yeah, we'll do that later. We'll do that in phase 2. And then they'll be like, well, I really need the ability to do X, Y, Z. Yeah, we'll do that in phase 2. Well, for some users, whatever they're asking for. It's actually what they need to do their jobs. And if you're transferring from a system to another system like Dynamics, and they used to be able to do their jobs in the previous system, then, that first impression of Dynamics, which means it makes it harder for them to do their job, it's going to be a negative one. And you cannot have a second first impression. So that impression they're going to get of the system is going to stay with them forever, and their opinion of the system and what they talk to other people about and all of that. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you had, I don't know, telephone integration, just to mention something, right? Let's say that on the previous system that you had, whenever a customer called, let's say you're a customer service representative, and a customer called, and the customer record just popped on the screen. You didn't have to search for it. And now you decide to go to Dynamics, and you either forgot that functionality existed because maybe a small team, which is 5 customer service representatives, are using it. You forgot that that's a thing, or maybe you decided not to provide budget to do it because you're like, we can always do that later. Or perhaps time-wise, like maybe the system that you were on, and this happened a bunch of times to me, the licensing agreement that you have for that system is yearly, and it was about to expire. October 1st, that's when we're supposed to renew, or they're going to kick us out. Okay, so we need to finish by October 1st. So some, I guess some compromises is the word I was looking for. Compromises were made, and some of the functionality that you have compromised on is like a requirement for someone to do their job. So now you're going to go live, and you're going to tell your customer service representatives that instead of having those records pop up on the screen the way they have been, working for 3 or 4 years or 5 years or whatever it is, now every time somebody calls, they're going to have to use QuickFind or something to find the records. It's not the end of the world. Like, they can still do their jobs, but it's very inconvenient. I mean, imagine that every time somebody calls you, which is essentially your whole job. So 8 hours a day, you're sitting there with people calling you to, ask questions or report problems or whatever it is. Imagine if every time that happens, let's say you get, I don't know, let's just say 10 phone calls an hour, okay? So you get 80 phone calls an hour, and now, or 80 phone calls a day. And now, those records used to pop up, and now instead of getting and having to deal with 80 questions or problems or whatever, now you're going to have to also search for 80 contacts. And it used to just pop up for you. I mean, it's a pain, right? So you want users to be able to test before you're all the way to the end. And I get it. I know that people in some cases, they'll say like, well, the reason why we spend time, working with stakeholders is so the stakeholders, we have somebody that is part of the team or leadership or whatever. It's like a user or a power user, and we'll take their feedback as part of the customizations and the final solution. And, that's why we don't need to have users tested early, because we're already working with a super user to create the solution. So once the solution is done, it's done. We don't need any users, to tell us what needs to be. Like, that is such a big mistake. Right? I mean, I've done solutions that I knew what I was doing, quote unquote, like I know exactly what needs to happen. And then somebody who has been in the company for 3 months will test something and be like, hey, how come, how do I do this or whatever? I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like, all the super users that we had in the environment did not even think about that. Right? Or they'll say something about SharePoint, or they'll say something about some mobility or whatever it is, because it's a pair of fresh eyes looking at this stuff and, finding ways to improve it. So you want to do that before you declare that your project is done, so you can incorporate, some of that feedback into the system. Now, granted, some of the feedback will be legitimately phase 2 or phase 3 or whatever it is. It cannot be done now. I like to build some cushion weeks before we go live to process that feedback, right? As we go through user acceptance testing, or we get users into the system, showing them kind of the beta version. We never say it's the final version because we want to hear what they have to say. I always build 1 or 2 weeks, or, sometimes more than that, depending on the project and the complexity, to deal with feedback. So if the feedback comes back and is something that is easy to change, let's say our changes to the sitemap, or changes to mappings, or I have to create some workflows or something like that, that is not complicated, that's what those weeks are for. I can take their feedback, incorporate it into the final solution, and by the time we train them and we go live, the feedback that they provided actually is in the system. The functionality is there. So I like that. But if somebody comes and says, like we really need a portal, well, I cannot do a portal in a week, right? That is a project on its own. That is a phase on its own. So that needs to, okay, I hear your feedback. This is something we're going to have to do later. So even phone integration could be something that needs to be done later. But at least don't say that what you're looking at is the final version of the solution and that's it. You want to give them a chance to provide some feedback that will make the solution better. I want the first impression from all of the users, and in a lot of cases, their first impression is at training. I want it to be a really good one. And I've been, hired before, and this was years and years ago, the last time this happened, where one of the partners did the whole implementation, and I was hired to do the training. Like people know that, I do training and I've done a bunch of training. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. So they're like, you know what? We talked to the partner. They don't have a trainer. Do you want to do it? So I've done it before. I come in and I do the training. And it is interesting to, for example, be in a room full of people that are all, let's say, salespeople or whatever it is. And you're supposed to log in, like I'm supposed to be logged in into Dynamics as a salesperson too. And then the stuff that I'm showing on the screen does not look like anything they're looking at on their screen. Or perhaps if I have 20 people in a room or 12 or whatever it is, half of them see what I see, half of them don't. That's happened to me before. And it's inexcusable. Like that is, it's just solution architecture 101. Like you need to make sure that the first impression is a good impression. For me, at least, I always want that to be the case. And I've been through that, It's like, and here you click on activities and you can see all of the activities from everyone in your team. And people are like, no, I don't. I can only see my own. And somebody said, no, I can see everybody's. And oh man, you never want that to be happening in your classroom or in your company, right? If you're working with a bunch of users or whatever it is, you want that to be consistent. So that's why I like to test early. Not early like at the beginning of the project or whatever. We just talked about the fact that security can wait until testing, but I definitely don't want people to start testing like right before we go live. And I've seen that, right? It's like, we're testing July 1st, we're going to go live July 7th. Like when they only give a few days to test like a solution that took a year to put together, like none of that feedback will matter, right? The feedback will come and be like, I'm sorry, we're going live on Monday, we'll do it later. That's not cool. So again, testing too late is number 4 on the list. Number 5 is, the people and the solution architects and the companies, if they're self-implementing, that create their model-driven apps too early. I don't understand why they do that. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And what I'm talking about is, as you know, in Dynamics 365, we have the app designer. We can create our own apps, and I love it. I'm a big fan of the app designer. Since it came out, I started using it. Since before we even knew it was called model-driven apps, they were just Dynamics 365 apps. And the idea is that you can create these apps in Dynamics 365 that include a subset of the overall functionality that you have in Dynamics. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you work for a company that has 4 divisions: Southeast, Northeast, Southwest, and Northwest. Okay? And you created Dynamics 365 to provide all of the data and all of the functionality that all 4 divisions will need to, use Dynamics or do their jobs, however you want to see it. But there is no point, or maybe there is no point, on showing the Southwest information and functionality from Northwest or Southeast or Northeast. It doesn't make sense. Southwest operates, as their own division. They need to see their data. They need to see their functionality and so on. So what you do is in Dynamics, you go into the app designer and you create a Southwest app. And that app has its own URL and you provide it to the users in Southwest. You can actually redirect them. There's a tip on 2 Minute Tuesday on how to do that. So the users don't even have to think about it. They just go to home.dynamics.com and they get redirected into, once they log in, they get redirected into their app, to their default app. So the idea is, again, you create an app per division, and when they log in, they'll see the records for their division, the views for the division, the dashboards and charts for their division, because some divisions may need they have dashboard needs that the other divisions don't have, and so on. So you give them a subset, like the Southwest piece of the chunk. So you have all of Dynamics with all of the information and all of the functionality. You take the Southwest piece and you create a Southwest app. The problem with doing that too early is that you're going to be changing your apps all the time. And I'm keeping it easy by having 4 divisions. I've seen organizations that have 18 apps, 20 apps, 10 apps, whatever it is, a bunch of apps. And then as you add an entity and you say, okay, we're going to have to capture whatever data, architects, let's just say, and we cannot capture them in context. Okay, cool. I need to create an architect entity. And who needs access to it? 18 out of the 20 apps. Now you have to go and modify that. And every time you create a dashboard, you have to go and modify that. And every time you do any change, perhaps you will have to go and edit all of your apps. Why is that? No one will be logging into your apps until you go live, essentially. Maybe during training, I get that. You want them to log into their app or whatever. But doing it early makes no sense. Just focus on adding all of the functionality and all of the the data and all of the items, essentially, dashboards, charts, forms, views, like all that stuff. Focus on adding that for the whole company. And right before you're going to allow users in or you're going to be training them and whatnot, at that point, once you have you look at the system and you're like, okay, this is the solution. Like, this is exactly what we need. Once you can do that, then create the apps. Don't do it too early. And I've worked with organizations before where they want to take ownership of that. They're like, look, we know our divisions. Just give me like a workshops in app creation, which is not hard. Like within 2 hours, you can learn everything you need to know, about creating apps in Dynamics 365 or model-driven apps, right? Especially if you know Dynamics already, it's pretty straightforward. It's easy to understand. 2 hours, and I'm exaggerating. In 1 hour, you can learn everything there is to know about model-driven applications. So, some organizations that I've worked with have said, we'll take care of it. Just give it to me. Leave it with me at the beginning of the project. And then next thing you know, you're like 2 weeks into the 6-month implementation and the apps are there. It's like, come on, man. Like, why? I told you to wait till the end because now there's going to be a problem, right? Now we have to deal with whether the users can see them or not, because you have to have the right security permissions to be able to see the apps. I mean, it's too much work for no reason. Just give yourself time, leave the model-driven apps to the end. And I get it because for the most part, in most projects, 99% of projects, I'm going to be the one creating the apps. And I get the customers get antsy about like, hey, where are the apps? You said every division was going to have their own app. Where are they? Can you show it to me? No, we're still working on functionality. We're still working on bringing the data in the system. I won't create apps until the data migration or data integrations are in place, for example. I wait. Data migration is more important. What do you do with an app that is empty? There's no value on that. So there's a lot more value on making sure the data is in the system. There's a lot more value in making sure that all of the customizations are in place. All of that stuff is way more valuable than having the model-driven apps. You can create that stuff super easy, right? And super fast. So there is no reason to rush and create your model-driven apps super early. And I get it. There's people out there that do it at like the first step. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go and create the model-driven apps. And I could never understand why they do that. This should be like last on the list, right before training and go live. That's when you do model-driven apps. And you do security before that. So again, if you're keeping track, remember security you want to do all the way to the end, but not all the way to the end when you go live, right? Almost all the way to the end. So you do all your security setup, you create your roles and whatnot, then you do your apps, and then you go live after that. You train, you get your users testing, train, and whatnot. So just wait. Model-driven apps can wait. Add it to the list at the end. Take it easy with that. Something that is kind of comparable to model-driven apps in a lot of people's eyes, it's actually the opposite in terms of timing. And remember, we're talking about wrong timing in projects. Mobility. Mobility is one of those things that people start super late and they should have started early. And the reason for that is because Your mobile device can be a tool that you can use as part of your solution. And I've done it a bunch of times. I've started in implementations where there wasn't even a mobility component. Like even on the SOW, like nothing was called out exactly. And then by starting on the project, I bring in mobility and say, do we have people that are traveling? Will they be using their mobile device to access the functionality? Is there anything that we should be able to do with a mobile device that can help in the solution? And in a lot of cases, the answer is yes. Being able to scan QR codes, being able to take signatures, right, when we go on site, being able to take pictures, for example, if you're in construction and be able to upload those. In a lot of cases, you can take the capabilities of a mobile device and embed it into your solution as a solution architect. I use it as a weapon. I use it as a tool that I can take advantage of for my solution. But I know that this is not the case for most solution architects. Most solution architects implementing Dynamics deal with mobility at the end. Like, okay, let's make sure it works in the mobile device. It works? All right, cool. Like that is the extent of their mobility focus, right? You want to start dealing with mobility early. At least understand how the users are going to use it. And if you've ever been, working with me in a project, or especially if we do an audit or some kind of workshop to see, if it makes sense to go to Dynamics, like you don't even have Dynamics, and I'm talking about mobility. I've worked with companies that have been, coming that are not using mobility because they're coming from a third-party application. And the first, it's not the first thing, but one of the first things I ask is, are you guys traveling? Do you use your mobile device? And thinking about ways in which the mobile device can help my solution, where they can become an intricate part of it. The same way a business process flow can be an intricate part of a solution, right? You say you follow this process, and that process is going to help you close this deal or solve this problem or register that vehicle, whatever it is, right? The same way a business process flow or an entity or an integration, a data integration is part of a solution, mobility is also part of it. And it's kind of, odd to see solution architects treating mobility just as another client. Like, this is just, I just need to make sure that it works on it and I'm done. Don't do that. Don't start mobility too late. Think about it early. And look, if the final decision after you talk about mobility early comes that, if it works on mobile, that's cool. But if not, that's fine. Like there's no value on the mobile device. It's just cool to be able to access it, but it's not a big deal. If that's the case, then fine. Do the project like most solution architects do it, where they start with mobility late, like late in the project. Let's just make sure it works. All right, cool. And that's it. But there is a chance that you could actually take advantage of the fact that they are a mobile, user base, and that mobility can be an amazing tool. Like I've worked with companies that I turn things around. I've worked with companies when they're like, okay, if it works in the phone, cool. If not, that's fine. And then I show them, for example, how they can use the speech to text to capture meeting notes. Like, yeah, we just go on site. Like my job is to make sure that our customers are happy. And, like I'm a customer success manager, for example. I travel the country or these tri-state area, and I travel and I visit all my customers and I meet with them, and I essentially I just capture notes, and somebody at the office will either open tickets or call them or whatever it is if they have any issue. But my job is to make sure the relationship is good, and I take him golfing and whatnot. Okay, perfect. Let me show you speech to text. So let's say you're walking out of your meeting. These people just said that, the last three shipments, three shipments have been delayed by several weeks, and you want to capture that on your meeting. Watch this. And I just hit the little microphone on my iPhone, and I say, met with Joe today. The last three shipments have been delayed for several weeks. Somebody needs to look into this. And I just show them the phone, how it wrote all of that in like real time. They've been typing that. Man, like people just love it. Especially if it's like a super long, like they need to capture accurate notes and stuff like that. Man, they just love that stuff. And now the mobile device becomes an intricate part of the solution. That free speech-to-text capability of their phones now becomes the way they do things for some users. Some other users sit at an office, in a desktop and they don't deal with their phone at all, right? If you're a customer service representative, you have a headset, you have a computer, you don't use your phone at all. But for some people, it might be part of their solution. So don't start mobility too late. All right, number 7, involving the right stakeholders too late. So people, for the most part, do a good job finding good stakeholders. And by the way, I've given some secrets before about how I select the right stakeholders and how I label them. So who's the primary versus who's an executive stakeholder and whatnot. I've talked about this in the past. But one of the things I haven't talked about is what are the categories of stakeholders that I search for when it comes to working in a project. So when customers are thinking about, I work with a customer and they say, it's like, well, the CEO is or the CIO is on board, or the leadership is on board, the C-level executives are on board. That's not a way to just, brush it off and be like, okay, stakeholders done, they're all on board. That's not how that works. There's 5 categories of stakeholders that I need to have before we start a project. I need to at least know before we start a project. All right. 4 of the 5 categories have to deal with the customer, and one of them has to deal with you as a partner. So let's talk about that one first. The first category, and is the one that I want to make sure I have, and the customer is not involved in this. This is just you, is suppliers or contractors. Let's just say. So if you're working, for example, with a functionality that you don't have expertise and you need a contractor for, whether that is training or portals or development or data integration or whatever, insert name here. And maybe it's none, but you need to answer that question. Will I need a supplier or a contractor to help me here? Now, we at Elevate Solutions have a very, very small list of companies that we trust that we work with in projects, right? And I've talked about some of those companies in the past. I'm not going to get into that, but we continue to go back to them because they have proven they have expertise and they know what they're doing, and we like to partner with them, right? I don't want to start a whole portal division at Elevate Solutions when I know that Engineer Code and Nicholas Hayduke, who's also a CRM MVP, is like the best in the world at doing that. I rather partner with them. So every time we have a portal project that comes along, I reach out to Nick. That is my supplier or partner, and I don't call it partner because we're going to talk about partners when it comes to the customer side. So I call it suppliers in my list, or contractors, let's just say. But for the customer, the relationship is seamless. It looks like the 2 companies work together. There's nothing weird going on. It's not like, we don't do that. You deal with that other company and it's like a ball that we pass around. Like, you deal with that. No, we'll work together to deliver the project. iNogic is another one of our partners that we love to work with. So, again, I need to answer that question. For this project, am I going to need a supplier? Am I going to need to partner up or to contract someone else to help me deliver the solution that I need? I need to answer that question. The customers don't answer that question. It's you as a partner who needs to answer that. And then you have 4 categories that you need to work with your customer to get an answer on. The first one of that I just talked about is partners, right? But partners are the ones that I call, from the solution perspective that the customers are aware of, meaning like, do I need to work with any distributors? Like sometimes the customers will have to get their licensing from a distributor, right? Instead of buying it from us, they have a massive contract with, another company. I'm not going to start naming them, but you guys know the large, licensing distributors out there, or disties, how they're called. Integrators, for example, maybe they have a marketing solution like Click Dimensions or whatever it is, and they need to work, we need to work with those companies because they're part of the solution, but they're delivering their own solution. They're charging the customer. It's a separate relationship. They have a relationship directly with the customer, even though we're partners with Click Dimensions in that example. It could be anybody. It doesn't matter. Sometimes, and we just finished a project with this, sometimes the partners are implementing something else within the company. We just work with a customer who implemented Dynamics 365 and Business Central at the same time. We are not Business Central partners, so we work with another company, or they work with another company on the Business Central side. I have no idea how much they charge them or how much they paid or anything like that. We're separate, but I need to understand who else they're partnering up with, because the project that I did on the Dynamics side had an integration piece, and we needed to integrate with Business Central. So I need to work with that other partner that my customer is working with in order to kind of seamlessly integrate the two systems together. Now, locally, that other company that they decided to work with has a Microsoft MVP, and we kind of knew each other, and that was a good relationship off the get-go. Like, oh, you guys are doing Dynamics, or you guys are doing Business Central, we're doing Dynamics, cool. And it was great to work with them. But in some cases, there are companies that I've never heard of. They have no idea who I am. I have no idea who they are, and it's interesting. So I want to have a list of that. Will there be any other partners or companies that I'm going to have to work with? And in some cases, the answer is yes, but it's not a big deal. Like, for example, I worked in projects where, like, the people from McKinsey Consulting were involved, and they wanted, they had eyes in the project or whatever. They wanted to make sure that whatever solutions were implemented match kind of the business challenges of the organization and whatnot. Like, I was aware that they were involved, but I never talked to McKinsey. Right? The customer was working with them. And that was great. That meant that whatever meeting we had dealing with business outcomes and whatnot, well, okay, hold on. We have to talk to the people at McKinsey and see what they think. They were never in our meeting, maybe because they charged like $2,000 an hour or something like that. I have no idea. But they were never in a meeting with me. But I needed to be aware that that was the case. I need to understand kind of the process to make decisions and the process to implement change in some cases. So that is what I consider to be partners. So that is category number 2. Category number 3, sponsors, right? And I already mentioned this, like the C-level is on board. Sponsors. And I went deeper into this in previous episodes by labeling them as primary sponsor, executive sponsors. But the gist of it is the primary sponsor is always the person who is kind of leading the project. More than likely it's the CIO of the organization. Some cases the CEO of the organization, but CIO is the most common one. That person is the primary sponsor in my eyes. But I want to list other executive sponsors. Who else is involved? Because the VP of sales could be more influential for me in the project because I'm implementing a solution for sales than the CIO. CIO is in charge of IT. And yes, I need IT to work with me. So the CIO will be instrumental to the success of this project for sure. But I do need to know in the user side or on the user side who is influential, and I can give them the title of executive sponsor. The beauty about executive sponsors is that you can have more than one. You can have 5 executive sponsors. It doesn't matter. Primary sponsor will always be the person who essentially is pushing for the project, which, as I mentioned, is typically the CIO. So that is category number 3. Category number 4 is business users. All right. Who are my users? Are there any external users that I need to worry about? Because in some cases, you will work in solutions that some of the users logging into it will be partners, will be other companies that your customer works with. Are they all internal users? Are they all just workers for the company? So you have to understand that. Are they all internal users, external? How do you give them access? Like, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. So I need to understand who my business users are. And also, out of those business users and understanding, why that matters and understanding who they are, that's how executive sponsors come to be, right? That's how I can trace that organization diagram up and find out who I can use as my executive sponsor as well. But the other thing is I can identify, super users. I can identify the users that will be involved in the conversations for the project, testing early, be instrumental to the solution. Because as an expert, if you're listening to this and you're a solution architect and implementer for a partner, as an expert, Dynamics and Power Apps and all of that technology very well. But for the most part, you will not know your customer's business as good as they know it. Now, I get it. I've seen people that become solution architects. They used to be on a specific industry. I worked in the past with someone who was an actual lawyer. Like, he was a lawyer, graduated from college as a lawyer, and the practice that we worked at was implementing CRM for law firms. So he knew their job, maybe not better than them, but he knew it way better than me. I'll tell you that much, right? Because I wasn't a lawyer, and here we are implementing CRM for law firms. I've worked with people that were realtors, and they're working on implementing CRM for realty companies. I've worked with people, again, they have worked in that field. I know MVPs that used to be like, let's say, professional salespeople, and they're implementing CRM for salespeople. Like, they understand that business very well. But for the most part, even if you have some industry expertise, you will not know their business better than them. Like, you could be a manufacturing expert because you've done 20, 30, 40 implementation for manufacturing companies. And you can have a lot of knowledge and best practices from those implementations and what you've learned from those customers. But by the time you get to work with ABC Manufacturing, they will be a different business, and they will know how they run their business better than you. Now, the way they run their business might not be the best way to run that business. It might not be the way you would run the business based on what you've learned from your 30, 40 implementations in the past. And that's great. That's why you're there, to make them improve. But it will be the way they run their business, and you don't know that better than them. So I like to bring in salespeople or whatever it is, the internal users or the business users. Let's just call them business users because they could be internal or external. The business users that will be intricate for me to make my solution. And I'm not saying they'll be the ones calling the shots, but they will tell me how they're doing their jobs, and my solution will make that better, right? They're the ones that are going to come in and be like, when we need to open up a ticket, this is how we do it. They know that better than you. So I want the real business users that are doing the job, not all of them, obviously, because you could be doing a project for a 2,000 user company. So that's just not feasible that you're going to have all those users, but get a group of the users that will be using the solution that you're working on. That is the group of users that you want in the system. And again, they're instrumental to the success of your solution. If you can create a solution that the users feel that they were the ones who were solution architects, they were the ones who created that change, then you win. I mean, no one wants the boat they built to sink. So if your business users believe that they build this boat, they will work triple as hard to make sure that the solution is adopted, that it's used, and that it works for the company. The final category is regulators, what I call regulators. Depending on the industry that you're working with, you have to understand that there's regulation. If you're in the medical industry, if you're in a pharmaceutical industry, if you're a CPA, things like that, there will be some regulations that you have to be aware of. So I want people to understand those rules, right? So I don't do something that violates one of their rules and regulations. I need to make sure that I cannot put this type of document on the cloud or this type of data in Dynamics. Like, there might be some data, especially if you're in healthcare, for example, there might be some data that you cannot do in the cloud. And I have to think about that. I have to figure out, okay, so if we need to keep this on-prem, we need to keep this protected. And by the way, regulations have been changing. So having stuff in the cloud is not as complex or, limited as it used to be, let's say 10 years ago. But if you are in that space, I need to know that, okay, maybe this I need to design as a virtual entity, or I need to design as a, integration of some kind because I cannot have it on the cloud or whatever, but I need to list that. And again, you need to ask the question, even if the answer is no. You might be working with a company that, let's say, I don't know, they repair washer machines, right? And dryers. And that's all they do, and maybe refrigerators, and that's all they do. So you talk to them, and you're like, are there any regulations or any industry regulations that I should be aware of? And they're like, no, there's nothing. Cool. Write nothing next to it, but I always have it as a list of things that I want to know before I start the project. So once again, those 5 categories are suppliers. Those are for you, not for your customer, right? What suppliers or contractors you're going to be working with. And then you have partners, which is on the customer side, and then you have sponsors, and then you wrap that up with business users and the regulators. So the people that will tell you, what it's off limits and what, you can keep inside of Dynamics 365. All right, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of clarity on kind of the categories of stakeholders that I think about. But remember, the idea is if you're involving the right stakeholders too late, like I'll give you one example since we just talked about regulators. Imagine you created a whole solution, and now when you bring in the regulator, whoever that is, they look and say, it's like, you can't have all that stuff online. No, you have to, no, that cannot be online. We would be violating HIPAA, blah, blah, blah. Like, that is a problem. And I've seen that happen a lot. And not just the regulator. Regulator is an easy example, but it could be business users bringing them in too late, which we talked about before, right? Remember, we talked about testing too late in number 4. Or if you're thinking about partners, right? Involving other companies that will work with the customer. Okay, now that you got all the way to the end, now I'm going to reach out to the company that implemented Business Central to talk about integration. And now I realize that the way they did it, because of, the challenges or whatever, was custom. And now the solution I thought I was going to do doesn't work. It's too late. You're causing problems. You want to start that early, right? Bring in or involve the right stakeholders early instead of late. So that is number 7. Number 8 is documentation. Now, I'm not saying documentation is super important to the success of every project. There are some projects that are a phase or whatever it is, and it's pretty straightforward. But it's always interesting when people think the documentation is, super important for their project, but then they want to start after the whole implementation is done. You will not remember all of the work that you did, even if you're really good at it and you had solutions in place for every customizer and all that stuff. Even if you were tracking everything you did, there are some things that are settings based that will not be part of solutions. There are some things that are just impossible to capture. And let's say that even if you had a list of changes that you made, understanding why those changes were made, who requested it, what was the logic behind it, and all of that, you cannot start that too late. You have to start that from the beginning of the project and really have a log in real time tracking everything that happened. Now, some organizations are really good at this stuff, and some organizations just want to do it at the end, and it's just not going to work, right? Don't wait too long to do the documentation. If this is something that is important for the customer, or if you're a customer and this is important to you, agree to this like before you even sign the scope of work or the contract or whatever it is. Like, hey, look, documentation is important to me. I know this is going to take time and it's going to involve people and it's going to cost me more money, but I need to have this documentation. So make sure you capture it, right? You want to agree early and you want this to be done from the beginning, because if you try to document at the end, you're going to miss it. There's no way you can get everything. The documentation, you will not be able to trust the documentation. So why even put it together and spend all the time creating all these documents and videos and whatnot if you're not going to trust it? If you're going to look at it and be like, I don't know, just because it's not there doesn't mean we didn't do it. If if you're going to be like that, why waste your time and money and effort? Just don't do any documentation. Just be like, okay, this is the system that I have and that's it. And also, it all depends on the levels of documentation. Sometimes customers just want to have like the schema. Like, I just want to know what are the entities and fields and all the stuff that we created as part of the project. That's it, just for me. So in the future, if we add more, I can go back and compare. No problem. We can use the document extractor from, the document generator from the XRM Toolbox, which will spit out essentially your whole schema and tell you exactly what was done. So if that's your expectation of levels, and yes, you want to wait till the end to do the documentation, because if you're going to export the schema, you want to wait until you're done to do it. So I get it. In those cases, this rule is non-applicable, but for most cases, if you want documentation the way most customers think about documentation, you need to start early. Don't wait till the end. Number 9, licensing. Licensing too early. I've seen this before. I always tell my customers that I always want to spend the least amount of money in licensing. Like, I want them to pay for the licensing for areas and functionality that we will be using. I think that's fair, right? And I think Microsoft would agree with that. Now, you need to pay for what you're going to use. But what you don't need to do is start paying for something that you're not using at all. So most of the time, I would say almost 100% of the time, we like to start the implementation on a trial. Trials in Dynamics run for 30 days, and then if you promise you're going to really buy it, if you provide your credit card and whatnot, they'll extend it for another day. So that is 2 months that you can save the customer money with licensing. The way I think about it is if a customer has, or if a Dynamics user, let's just say a company, has saved a lot of money in licensing that they're not using. So again, Microsoft doesn't want you to pay. I promise you. I've talked to customer success managers and leadership at Microsoft. Microsoft doesn't want you to pay for stuff you're not using. I mean, they have a whole team of customer success managers that the whole job is to make sure that you use the stuff that you're paying for. Literally, like that is their sole goal, is to go to a company and say, hey, you're paying for 100 licenses but only using 80. What's up with that? Use them all. Like, if you're paying for it, use it. Microsoft wants that. So it doesn't make any sense to buy a bunch of licenses that users will not be using for 4 months, 3 months, whatever it is. Like, just create a trial environment. It comes with 25 licenses. Create a trial environment, work on it for 2 months. I've even seen them extended for 3 months in some cases. Once you really, really promise you're going to buy it. And of course, we are, because this is an implementation. They will extend it. They'll let you work like that. Just go. Microsoft will be like, go, do customizations, import your data, do your thing. And then when you're ready, buy it. There's nothing wrong with that. This is not frowned upon. It's only frowned upon, again, when I see people telling the customer, hey, by the way, we're going to start this project. One of the things that you can do is buy the licenses, especially if they're buying them from a distributor, and the customers go ahead and buy. I've seen crazy amounts of licenses bought a year before the solution is even in place. And I don't get it. Like, why, even if it's cheap, like if you buy 1,000 licenses, and I think the most I've seen is 4,000, but if you buy 1,000 licenses because you have 1,000 users, but your system is not going to be ready for 8 months, like even if you're paying $1 per user, which is impossible, right? That's never going to be the case. So let's just pick something more relevant. Let's just say $10. All right, you're paying $10 per user, right? For 1,000 users, that's $10,000 a month for 8 months. $80,000. You know how much functionality $80,000 can buy you, depending on the size of your company. Of course, if you're Delta Airlines, $80,000, of functionality might not solve a whole lot, but that's a lot of consulting hours. That's a lot of training. That's a lot of, data quality checks. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm telling you, Microsoft doesn't want you to pay for stuff you're not using. They just don't. So hold off buying those licenses. Understand you need to buy them, but hold off as long as you can, because there is no point on owning all these licenses if your users are not going to be using it. Now, you don't want to, if somehow what you're doing will take less than 2 months, you don't want all the users to, you don't want to go live on a trial. Just buy the licenses if that's the case. But most projects will not be done within a month. Most projects are not like that. But once again, buy your customer time. Or if you're self-implementing, you're listening to this and you're a customer and you're thinking about implementing, buy yourself some time. Use a trial, use it as long as you can, and then buy the licenses. Now, I've seen it in some cases where timing really works out. I've seen it where, let's say you're in June and Microsoft fiscal year ends at the end of June, and you're in May or June or whatever, and somebody needs to hit their quota, and they'll give you a ridiculous deal. They'll be like, licenses are typically $30, but I'll give it to you for $15 or something if you buy before the month is over. Yeah, I mean, if you're planning on going live in August 1st, and they can guarantee you that they're going to charge you $15 a month for 2 years or something like that, or 3 years, guaranteed price locked in, okay, maybe it makes sense to buy the bullet and pay for 1 or 2 months that you're not going to be using it, just because you're guaranteeing yourself 36 or 34, I guess, months paying half the price. I get it. Don't be, I guess, clueless about the fact that you can take opportunity of a good deal. But if there's not a good deal on the table, if you're just going to pay a reduced price based on the number of users you have or the relationship you have with Microsoft, meaning you're already paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in licensing for Exchange and SQL and SharePoint and all that stuff, if you can get a good deal any time of the year, then wait. Just wait. Save the money, use it in functionality, use it in things that will make your solution better, rather than paying Microsoft for licenses that you're not going to be using. Microsoft doesn't want that. I promise you. I mean, obviously they want money, but they're not happy that you're paying for something and not using it. And I've seen this before with companies that buy a ridiculous amount of licenses and they never use them. It's sort of like, well, they were cheap, so I got triple what I needed. Microsoft will go back and be like, hey, why do you have, all these licenses and not using it? Like they don't like that. So once again, licensing too early is a problem. And now, right at, as we're getting close to the 1 hour mark, let's talk about the last one on the list. Number 10 is involving other partners too late. And I'm talking about your suppliers, let's just say, right? And also from the customer side, this applies too, which is a lot of customers will either self-implement or they will work with another partner that they previously had a relationship with, but, they're not really liking it, for example. And then they want to change their mind. Like later on, it's like, maybe we should work with another partner or whatever it is. That can be a problem. Involving other partners too late is a problem. I've seen it before where companies will have, a partner, or they work with a company that, let's say, deals with their IT. Like they do their technical support and maybe administer their Active Directory and Exchange and whatnot. And now that company says, oh, you're gonna do Dynamics too? I'll do that for you. It's like, but do you have Dynamics? I mean, it's Microsoft. Like, how hard can it be? I've seen that before. Companies go live with and they're really happy with their IT partner, by the way. They know what they're doing, and then they go way over their head with Dynamics. Or they think they can just hire some other consultant, to come and do the project. I mean, I've received countless solicitation for companies that are IT companies coming desperate because the customer they have, they convinced the customer they had to implement Dynamics with them, and they have no idea about what they're doing. So they come to me and say, Gus, can you help me out? Or, can Elevate come and help me out? And by the way, is it okay if we say you work for us for a few months? We just don't want we told the customer we knew what we were doing, and, we have no idea. Now we need somebody. No, like I've never done that. I've never partnered up with other companies like that. Not because, I don't think it's right, but typically is because I personally don't like to lie about the fact that, who I am and who I work for and what we do. Like, you want to partner up? We can tell them that we're working together, that you really wanted to make sure this was done right and you decided to partner up with a company, but I'm not going to go and tell them that I work for you. That doesn't work. And most of the time, those companies back off. They don't want to do it. They want to find somebody who worked. And by the way, look, there's even MVPs out there. They have no problem accepting that. They have no problem saying like, yeah, I work for XYZ company. Yeah, we're the best, even though they didn't even know about them 2 weeks ago. I'm just not like that. I want to be transparent. I want to tell people, and not because I want to keep that business or anything like that. I just want to be transparent. Like, I don't want to lie about it. All they have to do is go to LinkedIn and realize that I've never worked for them. And now my honesty is in question because I failed to mention that I don't really work for. Like, I don't want that. I don't want that drama. So yeah, I mean, you want to partner up with me? I've done that a bunch of times, by the way. If you want to partner up with us, we'll partner up. No problem. As long as the customer knows what's happening, that we're partnering up together and delivering this stuff, we're good. I'll sign any document saying that I'm not going to steal your customer, by the way, anything, because that's not what I want. I think this is a small industry and your reputation is everything. So I never want my reputation to be taunted by or tainted by, me not having, me stealing somebody's customer or whatever. I'm never going to do that. So that is one thing to keep in mind. But anyway, involving other partners too late. I'll give you one good example of this. It wasn't with a partner. It was a self-implementation. A customer from Miami reached out to me, or a company from Miami. It wasn't a customer. They never were customers, and I'll tell you why. A company from Miami reached out to me. They were a small firm. I think they were accountants, or they were in the healthcare industry. I don't remember, but it was like a professional, operation they had. And they reached out to me and said, okay, Gus, we want to know if you want to implement Dynamics for our company. We are, we're ready to go. We just need an expert to come in and customize it. And I'm like, what do you mean you're ready to go? Like, you're ready to implement? And they're like, no, we're ready. We bought the servers. We bought the on-prem licenses for all of our users. We set up the servers. We installed, Windows and Active Directory and all that stuff. Like, all of our stuff is ready to go, ready to implement. They had like 15 users. And when I said, it's like, okay, so what servers you guys bought, whatever, and they gave me the list of stuff they bought. It was pretty good stuff, by the way. They spent $30,000 on it. And I was like, you guys need to be online. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I started doing research. I found Dynamics 365. I guess the one I found was on-prem. And, we just went ahead and bought all this stuff and set it up. We have an IT guy here, and he set it up or whatever. He got as far as he could, and now we're ready to move forward. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I don't, on-prem is not the solution for you guys. Like, I'm sorry you spent all that money and you have servers set up and SQL and all of that, but you should not be using on-prem. You have 15 people. Like, that's it. And their solution, it just didn't make any sense to be on-prem. They are the perfect, like if you go to the dictionary and look for perfect Dynamics 365 Online customer, it was the logo of their company was in there. I mean, they were the perfect example of a good online customer, but yet, because they decided to involve another partner too late, they wasted, in my opinion, $30,000 of hardware and solution or licenses for all of those other systems and whatnot, and the time. Like the IT guy was working on this stuff for like a month, setting everything up in their data center or whatever, their server room, I guess, at their office. And now here I am coming and telling them that if they don't do it online, I'm not going to do it because it doesn't make sense. Now, I'm sure some other partner picked it up and they implemented on premise, but it just didn't make any sense for me to do that. They could have involved a partner, not us, any partner, early and say, hey, we're thinking about Dynamics 365. Do you have any advice for us? And 99.999% of partners out there would have said, you need to go online. I mean, I can't imagine a partner that said, okay, we need to buy $30,000 worth of servers and then we'll get started. That just doesn't make any sense. So had they involved another partner early, they would have saved a bunch of issues. Look, we have customers that, their first step when they started thinking about a CRM solution was to go to an event like the UG Summit or something like that. They wanted to see how other people were using it and what kind of success they were having and all of that before they made a decision. And that's a really good step. They have approached me at the UG Summit and say, look, we're thinking about implementing CRM. This is the kind of company we have. And, I can give them a really good idea of what approach I would take if I was implementing Dynamics for them. I mean, that's what we're there for, to answer questions and whatnot. So, any partner out there will be happy to give you kind of their ideas and how they would approach it. They are not going to do it for you. They're not going to tell you exactly how it's done, but they're going to tell you what their approach would be. And you can ignore it or you can accept it. It's up to you, but involve partners early, right? Involve them early. So that is number 10 on the list. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode about wrong timing in projects. I will tell you that 2 weeks from now, I'm not going to be hosting the show. We're going to have a repeat host come in. Lisa Crosby is going to be hosting the show in 2 weeks, and she's going to be talking about some cool functionality that some of you have heard of. I don't want to spoil it. I'm not going to tell you what the title is, but I have the episode already. It's queued. It's ready to go in 2 weeks. And I'm looking forward to listening to it because remember, I told you in the last episode, I don't listen to any of the shows that I receive. Lisa could have gone crazy in this episode and start talking about, lizards or whatever. Like, I have no idea what she did, but I'm excited to listen to it in 2 weeks. I hope you're excited too, and I hope to see you in 2 weeks from now. If you have any comments or questions about this episode, if you disagree with anything on my top 10 list of things that most people get wrong in projects in terms of timing, please leave us a comment. Go to the website, crmmvppodcast.com. All of our episodes are there. You can go into the episode and leave me a comment. Best thing about it is I get to know who you are because it's kind of like a Facebook integration of some kind. So it tells me your opinion, and you want your opinion here. And I'll respond to each one of those comments, by the way. So, and that way it's public for other people to see it. They can see your comments or questions, and they can see my answer to those comments or questions. And we can talk about it. We can debate as long as you want. And that stays there for people in the future to be able to see and learn from. Or if you want to just keep it more private, if you're, if you just want to email me and be like, Gus, that was not good. Don't do that again ever. If you want to send that kind of email as well and you want to keep it private, not embarrass me in public, I appreciate that. Send me an email at info@crmmvppodcast.com. That's where we, get all of our questions and comments. And again, I respond to every single one of those emails as well. I might be a little bit late to do that because of work and whatnot, but please go ahead and send me your emails there as well. Other than that, thank you so much for tuning in. We went a little bit over an hour, which is what I was shooting for, but we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Lisa hosting the show again, and we'll see you then.